Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal podcast. Our guest today is AJ. AJ Bubb is the AI strategist and founder at MXP Studio. AJ, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm very excited to be here.
My pleasure. Before we get started, can you give a quick intro about yourself and what you do to our audience, AJ?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, like many entrepreneurs, a person who wears multiple hats. So the primary role that I take is I help mid-market companies build products faster, get to market quicker, and de-risk innovation through the use of things like AI. So how do we just build better solutions for our customers? Uh, Previously in my life, I was part of AWS as an innovation advisor, helping to teach our customers how to innovate like Amazon. I was also part of Accenture Emerging Technology. My whole career has been around technologies. I was an engineer for a long time. I was a CTO like yourself. And now I am leading this strategy agency and really trying to advocate for this idea I call human plus AI, right? We see AI disrupting a lot of things. We see it being treated as a replacement. My view is it is a accelerator. It is something that can supercharge our capabilities, and we need to treat it as a partnership, not as a replacement.
Lovely. Thanks for the introduction. Without further ado, we can jump right into. We have three topics. We'll just start. Let's say I'm going to pick one at almost random, and then we'll start from there.
I
Uh,
love it.
Vibe coding. Let's start there. I know we talked for about a minute, maybe before I hit record, and you had mentioned that it's less. You wanted to talk less about the mechanics of it and more on what it actually does represent. So let's start there. I mean, what is vibe coding to you?
Yeah. So, you know, vibe coding itself is using AI to help to do the heavy lifting of coding. This is how I treat it, right? It takes all of the nitty gritty of the engineering work that I have to do to put together a prototype or a minimum lovable product, and it puts the uh, not the importance, but the all of the compute and all of the work on it on the AI, right? So it lets me bridge the vision into something tangible very fast. That's how I'm thinking about vibe coding.
Okay, you mentioned. I think you said prototyping. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that. I've talked to a bunch of founders, and I was under the impression that you could use vibe coding. As a developer who'd written all of my code myself for the most part in my career, I look at vibe coding as something that can assist people who are primarily non-coders, but that's not true, right? It can also assist coders to help make us more efficient. But in terms of taking as far as prototyping, you said something along those lines. And I'll ask you there because I've talked to founders, AJ, who have actually gone to production with vibe
Absolutely.
coding their way to production. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's safe to go that far, or what, in your experience, how far do you see people go with vibe coding?
Yeah, that's a great question because, the difference here is it a technology problem or is it a usage problem, right? If you're a developer and you understand what it means to go to production, that's very different approach and very different thinking and expertise than a non-coder who just opens up a lovable and says, I want to build a app that looks like this, right? One of the things I hear this conversation a lot, and I have this conversation a lot, is where does vibe coding end? And the reality is, I have yet to find that edge because it comes back down to AI is a tool that will do what you ask it to do, but you need to know what to ask it to do. And you need to know the corners that you have to look around. So that's why, it goes back to this idea of human plus AI. An engineer with this supercomputer in their pocket can do, yeah, go to production, right? You know what production looks like. A non-coder can go to prototype, can get something out there, can bring something to existence that they usually wouldn't have been able to do, right? So absolutely, teams can take something that they vibe coded and go to production, because as long as they have the core understanding of what does it take to go to production, security, scalability, uh, making sure that you have different test environments, is it usable, is it optimized, like if you have those fundamental principles, you can design for that, right? It's all architecture. If you don't have it, the AI is not going to help you because you didn't tell it to do that. And I think this
Okay.
is where we get a lot of the pushback of, oh, vibe coding is not going to get you there. It's like, well, because the people using it don't know what there is, right?
Okay.
So
So
the AI
where
is not going to do it.
you said where the question is where it should end, but also where does it actually begin? And here's what I mean by the question, which is if you're a non-coder, the very first line of code is generally or typically generated by the vibe coding software that you're using. If you're actually a coder, is it going to be exactly the same or is it going to be different because you have some sense of where you want to start? So your starting point and integrating the vibe coding platform or the tool, is it exactly at the same place, assuming you're building the exact same thing, or is it going to be at a different point?
So I would actually take a step back because you said, where would it start? Right.
Right.
And it starts with the problem. It starts with what you're trying to accomplish. Amazon has this great term, the durable challenge, right? Understanding what it is that you are trying to solve on behalf of your user. So even taking a step back from, the difference between vibe coding or an engineer opening up an IDE and where does the first line come from, it really came before that. It came from what is it that you're trying to accomplish, right? Because like doing raw coding, using vibe coding, these are tools to get to a destination. And the tool stack changes depending on your comfort level, your experience. But the act of understanding the problem, if you can articulate the problem, then you could figure out, well, what's the way to get started? So it starts from what am I solving for? Who am I solving for? What's the problem? Then you can start to look and say, okay, are you using Lovable or Cursor, or are you opening an IDE, whatever it is? That is less important than what is the direction that I'm trying to get to? What is the goal that I'm trying to code?
Okay.
Now
And
you could start going from that.
at whi- let's say if I start, the reason I ask a question, AJ, is if I
Yeah.
start using these tools earlier than I kind of want to, does it start influencing my direction even before I've come to an agreement within myself as to what I want to be able to build and how I want to be able to build? Assuming I have
Mhm.
sense of how that needs to happen, am I letting an external bias? I mean, let's assume the tool is smarter than Krish is, but
Mhm.
regardless, each individual as humans, we bring a certain set of experience to the table. By relying upon those tools prematurely, are we limiting our
Mhm.
ability to think and define direction, thereby being a little bit more at the mercy of the tool than we probably might want to be?
So that's an interesting question there. So I would say it's a yes and. In some cases, it's a yes. In some cases, it's a no, right? I think if I'm understanding your question right, like coming in without a mental model of how you want to approach building, will then we be relinquishing our agency in making those decisions over to the tool? So is the
Exactly.
tool going to start deciding for that?
Correct. Because if
And
the tool, because if then the tool
yeah.
starts deciding, let's assume AJ and Krish use the same tool. We have a similar problem. Let's pretend I'm going to assume a bunch of
Hmm.
convenient things. Same problem, same set of tools, and then outcomes are going to look not very different. And how do you start differentiating in the market? Eventually, when you end up solving the same problem, right? Even if it's a seventh or the 11th
Yeah.
restaurant on that street, you want that to be a little bit different in what it actually does serve. Yep. So that's my
Hmm.
question.
Yeah, and that's a great point because we're seeing that happen with SaaS software right now, right? I mean, I was using with my company a popular task manager that I won't mention, And I couldn't get it to do exactly what I wanted, so I just rebuilt it in Lovable, and it took a week, and now we have all these great features, right? So we're seeing this collapse of the the monolithic SaaS platforms, right? But then your question is right. Now everybody, not not everybody, but a lot of people, it has been democratized that we can rebuild an application. So what's the differentiator? And I think the differentiator comes back to that, what I had said earlier about understanding the specific problem you're solving, right? And that customer, because everybody's workflow is a little bit different. And I think what we're seeing is, and I think what we're going to get to is this world of micro SaaS where, there's a semblance of a platform there, the nuts and bolts of it, kind of like what you guys have with your APIs that you have available. You have the core uh, as a service, but then the final last mile of it is tweaked to the specific customer's way of using it. And
Makes sense.
that's going to end up, we're going to have 11 restaurants that are serving pizza, but this one serves deep dish and that one serves thin crust and this one serves extra greasy for some reason. I like greasy pizza. And you, you just, I can envision a world where as a founder, you're thinking of what your the total market for your software is a lot narrower, but also the cost to get to that market is lower.
Okay.
So we'll have micro SaaS. We're seeing it play out. I think we're seeing right now a surge in everybody's building an app. I mean, I'm on Reddit all the time, and as I built this new app, and here's my new task tracker, and here's my new whatever it is, uh, and we're seeing, HubSpot stock go down and things like
So,
that. And
so
we'll hit
let's
an
talk about
yeah,
let's talk about that specifically, right? You mentioned more people, you're on Reddit, a lot of people are building software. You
yeah.
provided us an example of something that you were using and you ended up building something. Now, let's say if you took a few years ago, AJ, whether you're trying to raise money or you're trying to go just live to serve end users and customers, you were building a solution. And what differentiated you, there were a few different things, but one of the main things was also the ability that you and your team had to actually deliver to requirements, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was yours or somebody else's. Because if you didn't have those skills as a team, you would probably have not gone live, at least at the time you intended for to go live. So that itself was a differentiating factor
Mm-hmm.
between people who could deliver and people who could not, or people who could build something to go to VC and raise money. That bar has been lowered dramatically. Now
Mm-hmm.
everybody is able to use a lot of these tools and build something or a lot of things. So that being the case, what happens? What are some of the things that used to be differentiating factors that don't end up being so anymore? But more importantly, what do you think are the new differentiating factors that you have to take to the table, either to raise money or to appease a customer with the feature set that you actually have in your product?
Yeah, great question. I think the differentiating factor is your ability to get in front of your market, to identify the problem, to get in front of customers, and to actually be collaborating with them to solve their needs, right? Because when delivery is now not a moat to getting to the market, what's the moat that's left? And that's you actually being in the hands of your customer, right? And I think that the world is getting noisier and we're going to have to be more creative on how we get in front of the customer. And that's where we're seeing a lot more in person, a lot more community outreach, founder led sales. Everybody's about founder stories now. It's less of the brand, more of the person, and who can you get in front of. So this is all becoming more important because anybody can build. So what's the difference? Uh, I think an adjacent of it is to look at the difference between the information economy and content economy. Is, it used to be your value was the information that you held to yourself, just like with uh, launching application, launching your latest app. It used to be that your ability to build and deliver it was your value. When we went from information to content, all of the content's out there, all of the information's out there, right? Now the value is, do I trust Krish to be the one to tell me what I should know? Right? That's the difference. So it's the same. It's not, can we build it? It's, do we trust AJ with his task tracker that is going to solve our need? And that's what
Okay.
we're seeing, right? It relies on me more.
So let's say I'm going to play the devil's advocate here for a second. Let's say two
I
people are
love that.
building software. AJ is building it, Krish is building it. We're solving the same problem. Let's say AJ happens to be a developer or an architect in his past life. Uh, Krish does not happen to be one of them. Let's say he was product manager, right? Or somebody else
Hmm.
was probably part of an engineering team, maybe or maybe not, but never actually wrote code. This is our role, and here is their assumed backgrounds. Now both of us go to build it, even though one part of the assumption, AJ, is that vibe coding tools are going to help both of us go to market with the same set of requirements. That's true. But given the fact that AJ is actually a developer or an architect or both, let's say each of us give ourselves a month to go to market. Does it also not mean that, given AJ's background, with the same set of new AI tools available and his experience in that space, he's actually going to be able to build a lot more in that same month than Krish is going to be able to do? Or do we go with, no, both of them are using vibe coding tools for the most part. So I don't expect for the end outcome to be very dramatically different when it comes to the number of features or the complexity of these
Hmm.
features. How do you look at that in this hypothetical scenario?
I think so. If we were to take your question literally, the developer with experience in that problem. Ooh, okay. Let me backtrack on that first part. The individual with the most experience in that problem space is going to develop something that is much better suited to solve that problem. And the reason that I took the developer word out of it, because I don't think that developer or not is going to make the full difference. It's who's spending more time understanding the problem that they're solving, right? In terms of complexity and richness of features, if that's what we're looking at, the developer, the engineer is probably going to have much more complex features, much more functionality in the app. However, that brings us to the conversation of speed versus velocity, right? Speed, velocity, a lot of teams, engineering teams, for those that don't know, velocity is the measure of how fast you're delivering work in a
Mhm.
sprint, right? And we say, what's the velocity? What's the velocity? We've closed 30 story points. Velocity, literally, what is velocity? Speed and direction, right? Closing a story point is a speed. Having it approved as, yes, this solves the problem is a direction. So going back to your question, and the reason I bring that up is, a developer who understands the tool that can code faster does not necessarily mean that they can build the right thing. And that's the difference. Is you can, when I was talking about prototyping, like, we can come up with new features a lot faster and we can keep building. But if you don't get that in front of the customer, and if you don't make sure that in real world scenarios, what you're building solves for the need, then you're just going to go on speed in the wrong direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me some of the tools that you like to use for vibe coding.
Yeah. I'm a fan of Lovable. Uh, the stack that I typically use, I started experimenting with Lovable a year ago, and it just blew my mind. Right, as a person who used to code HTML by hand who started with C and C++, uh, sitting down and being able to just speak in natural language and say, this is what I want, I I was astounded. As I started doing more and more and burning through credits and it gets really expensive, I started adding in new tools. So my my ideal toolkit right now is Lovable for a lot of the front end and debugging, and then I pair that with Claude Code and VS Code, and I have lots. My documentation for the projects that I have is probably about half the size of the actual code, so that when I go and I use AI to create new features to do debugging, it has so much context about the project, the patterns, the architecture, why we made decisions, that it can turn around and say, yeah, I understand what we're building, and it builds it. And most of the time it works.
Okay, and then what was, let's say we take Lovable, what the most recent thing that you did build AJ, what language did you use? Was it like TypeScript or what was the language that you used?
Yeah, so Lovable is all React and TypeScript. It's JavaScript. The last time I actually coded without AI, it was C sharp, and it was probably 10 years ago,
Okay, so let's go
right?
with this, right? So it
Yeah,
generated this code. Do you look at the code like, do you look at the code that it generates? If so, to what extent do you actually review the code that the tool generates?
great question. So I had been for a long time, right? And I would at least get my eyes on the code. And I needed to make, so as a founder, I needed to make a decision. Am I building this to build it right from the beginning, or am I building this to get data? And the answer was, I'm building it to get data, because I don't know if my product is going to have a demand, if my product is going to meet a need. I wanted to validate that. So what I did was I began to focus a little bit less on looking at every line of code, and I focused a lot more on defining what I was trying to have happen. So the actual user interaction, we would have called it before test-driven development, right? Engineers would write their test, and as long as
Right.
the code passed the test, it was okay.
Right.
Now we call it spec-driven development. You write up the spec. What is the user journey? What's the interactions look like? What is the input and the output? And then take that to AI and say, okay, code me something that meets this spec. It's
Okay.
kind of the same as what we would have done with a junior engineer. Here's our test. Go build us a function that does this thing. Except now we could do it faster and more complex. So to answer your question, I started moving further away from looking at the specific code and more into trusting my ability to write a spec that made sense and using AI to implement it. And then when I do
Okay.
the QA and I go, and because this is still the minimum lovable product, I'm not as concerned. But even that, I have agents that go and do code reviews, architecture reviews, query reviews, right? Oh man, AI loves to do N+1 database calls, right? And you
Right.
have to go and start optimizing all of the calls. So, I'll go back to security review and try to figure all of that out. But then at the same time, I know that once I get into production, I'm going to have to hire a team that's going to go back and really make this scalable.
Okay. Makes sense. We are one third of our way in. Good time for us to get to the
Yeah.
next topic, which is
Yeah.
you had mentioned the resurgence of hybrid roles, meaning you had said that it was not enough to be a specialist and need to be more than what you are when you bring yourself to the table. Let me give you a context and I want to get your thoughts on that,
Yeah.
AJ. So I've talked to a number of founders in the recent months, and even for work that we do, starting with hiring or staffing, who you're bringing into the team, to how they go about doing their job is changed quite a bit, right? Dramatically in the last many months or a year or two. And it's because with a lot of these tools that are available, you don't need to have a lot of the skills that you needed to have had in the past, which means when you're hired to do something, it cannot just be that singular something, at least for smaller organizations, because we never had the
Hmm.
luxury as startups to be able to hire AJ and have AJ do that one thing. You almost always had to wear multiple hats, but the breadth of those hats has just increased now, which means your hiring process needs to have changed to accommodate that as well. So, what are you seeing as some of the changes in that space of maybe it's hiring, maybe it's training, maybe onboarding them onto the team, or actually assigning tasks to those team members? What are some changes that you're seeing? What are some profound changes that you're noticing in that space?
Yeah. So the benefit of where we are with technology is a lot of people can pick up a lot of new things really quickly, right? The drawback to that, and I think where we're going to see a lot of the challenges, is just because you can do a thing doesn't mean that you have the contextual understanding of what that thing is, right? So we have these hybrid roles now. You can't just be an engineer. You also have to be able to think in terms of product. You have to be able to think in terms of user experience, in terms of research. You're basically a one person cross functional team at that point, right? So now, in terms of hiring, when I look for hiring, I look for individuals who I can throw a problem at and who can think creatively and who can walk me through their train of thought and their process of how would you solve this, right? Because if they could think through how they could solve it, then they could probably use AI to solve it, right? The challenge is they can sound really, really good at giving you a solution that they have no idea what that is, right? So somebody who has never done user research can come in and say, I would ask these questions to my users so that I understand what their pain points are, right? And they could blow you away at the interview. But then you get out into the field and they don't have any experience in that and they miss all the nuances. So, like, on one hand, we're starting to maximize hiring for these generalists because they could do so much because the demands on people are so high right now. But on the other hand, if they're too general, we lose all of the experience in that one skill set. And this is concerning to me because it goes back to your question about, is an engineer or developer going to be better at vibe coding or not? We don't know what we don't know, right? The known knowns and the unknown
The
unknowns, right? We
Rumsfeld
don't, yeah,
quadrant, right? Yeah.
yeah. We don't know what we don't know. So when you get people who rely too heavily on AI who can appear that they talk the talk, walk the walk, delivered the thing, and it's great, and you put them in the field, the risk is high that they're going to fall on the face. So now you, as a CTO, as a hiring person, you need to know more because you have to suss out, does that person know what they're talking about? Like, how has it been for you? I'm sure you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail in the coffin there, right? Here is a challenge that I see. Exactly like you said, I'll give you an example of a conversation I had with somebody on the podcast who is in the space of energy, right? Deals with data centers and energy and investments that relate to energy, right? Now, we had this conversation, and I do very little in that space of energy, but I know data centers because I live in Northern Virginia and I understand the need for energy. I understand what a 1 gigawatt data center can or what the size of square footage might look like, but not much more than that, right? Maybe the basics. What I had told him was, hey, going by the argument of AI can do a lot of these things, and you could be pretty uneducated about a number of things and still use these tools to help you. I don't know anything about energy, so I have to go to these tools and I have them ask some basic questions, assuming I do even know to ask those initial basic questions that are sensible enough. Otherwise, I'm letting the tool dictate terms to me. And what the gentleman had told me very nicely was, he said, Krish, the way you want to use those tools, the way he would use it is if he was somebody in that space, that he understands how this industry works by virtue of being in it for 3 decades, and now he's able to guide the tool to sort of tell him what to do and how to do things faster, quicker, maybe even better, but he's leading that effort. He's not
Mm-hmm.
letting the tool lead that effort, and there's a fundamental difference between the two. And that would be my answer, AJ. But I have a question to follow up with that, which
Yeah.
is, when you talk engineering, since we are developers, I'm not able to think as somebody who's a non-developer and what challenges they might have. I mean, I can speculate, I kind of have an idea, but I've not lived through those challenges of being a non-developer using
Mm-hmm.
vibe coding tools. On one side, people have the confidence, which is nice that they do and they should, but on the other side, going drawing a parallel between this energy example, can Krish run this project just as well as that other person who's been in that space for 3 decades? Not a chance, not even close by any stretch of
Mm-hmm.
the imagination, because I know what I don't know and I don't know what I don't know either, right? Both
Mm-hmm.
sides to that, which means I might end up doing the wrong thing, asking the wrong questions, asking things that I should not be asking, being influenced by the hallucinations of the tools. So I could end up building something, but maybe that's not the something that I wanted to build to begin with. Is there a problem here that people are conveniently overlooking in the interest of just getting things done? That's something that's going to come back to bite all of us in the long run.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's two parts of what I heard that I want to touch on. The first one, let's start with, is this a problem that's going to grow? Absolutely. And it's both, it's driven both on the demand side and the supply side, right? So the demand side, the demands on people to produce and be productive have been have never been higher, right? We're being squeezed and expected to do more for less, right? So that's the demand side challenge. And on the supply side, us as individuals, we are also trying to do more with our time. What does that lead to? We cut a lot of corners,
Right.
right? And that's the term AI slop, all the AI slop that's coming out, right? I've read a study, it was something 2/3 of uh, senior expert resources, 2/3 of their time is turning into proofreading AI slop. So they're not even thinking anymore. This is the chemist who they've been in chemistry all this time, and now they're just fact checking papers that are coming out, right? They're just fact checkers because the amount of content is coming so fast.
Which means we
And
stop using our agencies, like you said earlier, right, AJ? That's a big
exactly,
problem, isn't it?
exactly. And that muscle is going to atrophy. And then that leads to the earlier point that you just made on uh, the right questions to ask. But what you don't know, that and you know that you don't know. This is where the positive outlook that I have for all of these tools are. For the people that are curious, it has never been a better time to be curious, right? The way that you said about approaching the tools as somebody who's been in an industry and leading the tool. But even if you weren't in the industry, if you just know how to ask questions, keep asking questions. I'd like to say that don't use AI to give you the answer. Use AI to help you identify the corners that you need to look around. What are the questions I should ask? How do I gather the real world data? That's where the power is. Because now, you said, what if I don't know the questions to ask as a non-developer? Most people don't. What do you do? And this is why when I talk to people about vibe coding, it's not so much about I don't know how to code, can I code now? It's about the mind shift of I don't know how to do something to what is it I'm trying to do? And what are the questions I have to ask to get there? Like that's the thing that blows my mind. It gets me so excited is that as long as you're willing to dig deeper and deeper and ask questions, you can start to pool everything together and produce something quickly. We weren't able to do that before.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the skepticism as well.
Yeah.
there is no conversation that's to be had these days, AJ, without AI in the mix of things.
Hmm.
I don't even mean professional conversations. You go to dinner, you're meeting a friend. I mean, somehow or the other, I feel like AI makes its way into the conversation. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's people not knowing what's coming, maybe things that are reading, they've been subject to at work. So it's become part of our lives, whether you're actively using some tools or not. Now, on one side, which means, okay, sure, it's here. There's no doubts around it. There's little to be skeptical about. But that's not the case because I was just reading yesterday the hyperscalers, the ones that are spending the most amount of money on capex, particularly geared towards AI tools, whether it's data centers or chips in those data centers or energy related costs, whatever the cost could be attributed to, they're spending tons of money. And every
Hmm.
time they've said that, the market's not reacted very well. They've generally been penalized for that. And just to look at the some of the hyperscalers, right? I mean, I was looking at them yesterday because I told you like we are building a fintech API. So we do
Yeah.
spend some time in the stock market, and like it or not, we are exposed to it on a daily basis. I'm going to quote some companies and get your thoughts on them. Take my numbers with a grain of salt. It's something from my memory. I think Microsoft and Meta are down about 35% in the last maybe, I don't know, 6, 12 months or something like that. The other
Hmm.
ones, like Amazon, Alphabet, Alphabet's actually one of the anomalies, but even that in the last 6 months, some of the other companies, hyperscalers, have dropped about 19% in the double digits. Tesla, maybe
Hmm.
25%. The one that's had the least drop has been the one that has done the least when it comes to AI directly. I love Apple as a company, but they have actually spent the least amount of time, I think, directly doing it and now relying on Gemini and other tools and models
Hmm.
for firing their AI, supporting their AI needs, so to speak. Now, I've given these numbers, hyperscalers spending a lot of money, but there's skepticism. The market's not reacted to that very well. There's skepticism around SaaS and software companies. Overall, if you took the stock market and tech companies, it felt like they were doing very well. I'm sure the last 3 years may have been good up until like maybe last year, but things are turning to the other side now. If AI is here with certainty, if there is definitive value that it brings to the table, which I think it does, but let's take it with a grain of
I
salt.
agree. Yeah.
Why is there skepticism? And I first of all, are you seeing this skepticism when you talk to people, your customers, your employees? If so, what are your what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think that it's a mix of a lot of things that the skepticism is coming from, right? There's always the question, are we in a bubble? Right? Is this the dot com bubble again? Uh, we can both be in a bubble or not be in a bubble. You mentioned it yourself. AI is transformative. I believe it, right? I had a friend who said that it's like when the printing press was invented. And I challenged that. It's not like the printing press was invented. It's like the printing press was invented and put into every single person's home in the world at the same time. The
Right.
technology is absolutely transformative and we're not going back, right? That part is real. The bubble side is the overinvestment, the overhype of it, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology. For to be more technical, an LLM is a language model. It's a statistical probability machine. It predicts what the next token is going to be. It's not a compute engine, but you have all these people using it as a compute engine. That's not what an
So
LLM is designed for. So there's a misunderstanding, and then as part of that, people just want to get in on the hype. And now that there's uncertainty brewing, people are trying to get their money out before things crash. And there's a
so
lot
where do
of
you
reasons for
see
that.
so where do you see this? I mean, you talk to people, let's say if you talk to 10 people hypothetically, how many of those people are lock, stock, and barrel on the side of, hey, you know what? This thing is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and we feel positive about it. versus the number of people who have that sense of an iota of skepticism, maybe not about the fact that it's transformative, but about the fact that maybe the reach or the breadth or the whatever of these tools is not going to be anywhere near what we are made to believe that it's going to be.
That question depends on where we are. I We're both in the DC area, and before moving to DC, I was in San Francisco for 8 years. If I were to go to San Francisco, I would say 90% believe this is the real deal. Everything has changed. Like, this is the thing. Being out here on the East Coast, I would say 9 out of 10 people that I meet do not believe in
Wow. So
AI.
you're saying there's a dramatic difference between just two coasts within the same country.
Yeah, because
Wow.
San Francisco, they're very technology forward, right? They live in it. It's a lot more engineers. It's a lot more technical. I think when you get out of these tech hub areas and you get into people, and for context for your audience, I meet a lot of people, so I'm always in the DC. So these are people who are not in defense, who are not in tech, everyday people, doctors, uh, researchers, lawyers. Lawyers, I think we're seeing more and more lawyers, but just the folks that aren't working with AI, they have a very different perspective on it. They don't feel that they can trust it. They don't want to use it. They hinge on a lot of the negative PR around AI. And that's just not what you see so much in a tech hub. And both of the sides, like, the truth is in the middle, right? You go to uh, a tech hub. What was the Super Bowl commercial Amazon Ring did, where it was locate your lost dog? And I forgot what they called it, but basically, if you lost your dog, it would use all of the Ring cameras in your neighborhood to help
Okay.
you find your dog. And they sunset the feature already because of it's a privacy thing. Like,
Right.
are you
Yeah.
crazy? Uh, I have friends that work at Amazon around that team, and they were all surprised at the back. They didn't even think about it. So my point in the story is, when we're out of the tech hub, people are very apprehensive about the technology and they think that it's going to do nothing but harm. And when you go
So to
into
the
the tech hub, they think that
so
it's the greatest
AJ,
thing. Yeah, yeah,
I want to ask you about the first part of what you just said there, right?
yeah.
Sorry, which is the people that are outside the tech hub. Our lives as engineers or other roles within an engineering organization better have changed dramatically. I want to say it should have because it has, but as I talk to more people, I'm not seeing the level of changes to the extent that I'm generally expecting. It's
Hmm.
if Meta or Alphabet say that they're completely changing the way they're doing things, even in the US, in our country, I don't think that has trickled down even to all of the engineering organizations. Right now, you go to larger companies, mid-sized companies, it takes a long time. Humans do not necessarily adapt at the pace at which technology does. I've seen this
Mm-hmm.
like time and again. But that's still in the space of engineers and engineering. If you went outside, the people that you're talking to who don't happen to be building software, how much of these tools are they one using outside of chat gpt or some basic tools? How much do you think they're using, and do you see that their jobs have changed dramatically to accommodate the tools that have become available? Or do you feel like when you talk to people in the DC metro, you get the sense that they're kind of doing the way they were doing things in the past with some AI assistance, maybe using some chat GPT and Claude here and there, but the fundamental approach to solving their problems in their organizations for whatever it is that they're doing, that hasn't changed a whole lot.
I think it's kind of the latter, what you just said, right? Adoption is still slow, especially in legacy organizations and especially even further in non tech organizations. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of the tools they still require a level of technical competence. I'll, how many people have you met that still struggle with tools like Word and Excel or can't get their printer
Right.
working? Probably a lot,
Right.
right? So using these tools is even still a further reach for them. So that's from the individual side, right? And then you mentioned the organization side as well. Organizations move even slower than people, right? And I agree with you. I haven't seen the change that I expected from the amount of noise that you hear about the change. Are companies releasing products faster? Are like, and when I say companies, I mean like larger companies, not startups
Right.
who were already had to be. Are you? Do you feel that things are getting better, faster, cheaper?
Yeah, it's a good question because I'll speak to it even from our standpoint, right? At Snowpal, we do a few different things. One of it is, like you said, we build APIs. Now, we have a certain mechanics to how we actually go about doing it. We use multiple languages. We are a polyglot shop, but yet, we are a well-oiled machine because we've built like 8 different APIs. So as we
Mm-hmm.
worked on building the ninth one, AJ, it would have taken us problems are different. The approach we take to solving that building the API is different, but yet when you have all the pieces outside of the core business in place, you sort of it's like a Lego, right? You keep building it, and you know what you're doing as a team. You can chug along
Mm-hmm.
quickly. But we've intentionally paused because we want to build this next thing that we're doing not just differently as it turns out for the end user, whether it's a business user or an end customer, but the approach that we take to building that API or the product, or both in some cases, we want that to be a reflection of the current day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Just so we know that we've kept in touch with the times and we know we can adapt quickly to what's changing. Now, it's funny, right? If we didn't do that, we would have built these quicker because we are an engineering team. But by
Mm-hmm.
virtue of wanting to do it differently, very intentionally so, I don't know we've necessarily brought productivity to the table for this first thing that we're doing or the second thing that we're doing. But the hope is that it'll help us build the seventh or the fourth or the sixth product that we're building from here on much faster. At least that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
So you take a hit here and you're like, let me learn the ways of the game. And that's been rather overwhelming also, even for an engineering team that's done this for a long time, because there is a proliferation of AI tools. And deep
Mm-hmm.
down, I know that a lot of these that we might rely upon, like Neo Clouds, for instance, not all of them are going to exist 3 years from today, right? It's just the
Mm-hmm.
truth of the matter. So if you're a startup, you want to be careful where you're investing your time, money, and resources because you don't want to be caught into something that you spent a lot of time and you have a dependency, and suddenly they end up sunsetting that product because that Neo Cloud does not exist. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
fine balance between what you want to build, how you want to build it, and who you're relying upon to be building this. And again,
Yeah.
here is something that I have AI guide me by asking the right questions by using my experience from the past. But if I did not have that experience, I wouldn't even know what to ask or in which sequence to ask those questions, which is why I was, going back to some of what we said earlier. You've got to have some of the background and the back belonging before you start using the tools to help you become a bit more efficient, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. The people who are going to benefit the most from AI are the people who have the most expertise. And that scares me because have you ever seen the memes of how was it? It was like Thanksgiving dinner, and it's like uh, Boomer, Gen X, Gen Z, Gen A, and then in the door it's the shining light of the Savior, and it says Millennial coming to fix the computer, because
Okay.
nobody knows how to fix a computer other
Right.
than millennials, right? I worry that this is the same challenge. How are people who don't have the experience going to get the experience? If there's not a learning and a progression plan, how are they going to learn? That's what worries me, is that we're the generation of experts that it's not cost effective to hire new people who are going to perform less than us,
So
but
on
we
the other
have
side
to.
of this, AJ, does it
Yeah.
mean that we can, given the fact that we can do what we don't know how to do, we were talking mostly from the standpoint of engineers and having other people join us. But let's say we put ourselves in those shoes. I don't know how to create music. I don't know how to create art, whether it's digital or otherwise. Can
Hmm.
Krish now explore other avenues? And is that how you see some of us go in future? Meaning, hey, I've been doing something a long time. I don't particularly enjoy what I do, but I didn't know how to do something else very well or whatever. But now that there are these tools that help me do things that I don't really know how to do, can I take this as an opportunity to shift careers and go exploring things that I would have never been able to do? I mean, is that, am I just being creative here, or do you see people actually switching careers, changing careers to doing things that they're not particularly well versed with because they can now rely on these AI tools to assist them?
That's a interesting question. I don't know if we've hit the answer for that yet. I think a lot of people are being forced to rethink their careers right now. And I know just about every one of my friends who works in tech as an engineer wants to switch to become a woodworker and not technology anymore. Uh, but I think that we are in a world where we have the ability to experiment faster and we could try more. And again, it goes back to the people who are curious. It's being able to try something new and being able to build a business around it have always been different things, right? What's the difference between a starving artist and a rich artist? One thinks of a business,
Right.
right? That's going to be the same. Yeah, we could try a lot of things, but if you don't know how to monetize it, then you're not going to monetize it, right? I think it's easier to get that knowledge now, so you have to be willing to do it. So I think it shifts the question of why am I unable to monetize a thing? Is it because I don't know how, or is it because deep down I really don't want to? Like the question or the reason shifts. There's a lot. There's no straight answer to
No,
that.
I know what you mean. And do you expect, last couple of questions before I'm going to give you time to ask me what you want to ask me, AJ, if there's any.
Yeah.
Do you expect a wave of layoffs coming in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months? Do you expect a lot of people in different careers in software engineering and outside other careers as well being asked to be, being let go and having to be finding themselves in a position where they either have to, I don't know, do something else or do what they're doing but very differently from what they've been doing? Do you expect that, or do you think that's not so much room for concern there?
So I can't predict the future, of course. I don't know what's going to happen. Here's what I hope will happen. That I can say. Uh, where there's need, there's opportunity. And what I hope will happen is that if there are continued ongoing layoffs, right? The last time we saw this during the financial crisis, during the dot com bust, the proliferation of new businesses and new ideas that came after that was amazing. And, you know, I hate to say the whole, oh, it's going to be painful in the short term. It's painful now, and the pain is real, right? People are struggling. The optimist side of me has to believe that there is something that is better on the other side of it. We're going to have to make that happen. And I think what that better is new businesses, new ideas. You know, you have these hyperscalers that own the market, that don't have competition, that are making kind of not great products anymore. Well, that means there's going to be a market for people who want better things. So I
Makes
think those
sense.
better things are what's going to come. I don't know how long it's going to be. And I wish that we didn't have to be the ones to live through that, but we are.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions that I can answer? I have one last thing to ask you, but before that,
Yeah.
do you have any
Yeah.
questions for me?
Yeah. I would love to know, like, what is exciting you the most with AI, and what are you most apprehensive about?
What's exciting me the most, AJ, is when you're building products as a smaller organization, we always back ourselves in doing things a little bit more efficiently than the larger companies. Like you mentioned, right? The bigger you are, the more red tape there happens to be, whether you like it or not, and the slower you're going to move. Smaller companies, not so much. So I've worked for startups other than my own for a long time, and I've enjoyed doing that. And we back ourselves in to do things quicker than some other people, some other companies could possibly do. But there's only so much even we can do, even if our hope and intent, and even if we don't go on vacations. I've not gone on a vacation in many many years, but
Oh
there's only
no.
so there's only so much you can do. But with AI, what's exciting me is that so much has become a lot more, actually, right? It's actually become
Mm-hmm.
more. So even publishing a podcast, for instance, uh, you know different people do it differently. There are companies who just do this for a living. And when I talk to people to help us with the organizing of this and publishing and distributing, they charge a fair bit of money. And we said, you know what, as a startup, we would rather use that money someplace else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not for the publishing of the podcast. The fact that we are able to do it, a fair number of those, with people not dedicated to doing something like this, is because of all the tools that have become available, right? And we have to
Mm-hmm.
use them in the right mix. So there's a human touch and there's machine that's helping us do a few things as well. Though that's a very concrete example, very relevant to the current podcast, about why it excites me, because I think we have finite time on planet Earth as humans. The more you can do, you don't want to stretch work to make time available, to the full time available, because you're going to do only so many things before you die. So by virtue of having AI and tools available, each of us can achieve a lot more. So that's exciting,
Mm-hmm.
unquestionably. What makes me anxious? Changes don't make me anxious from an engineering standpoint, AJ, because we have been in this business. Change has always been there in software. There's never a period of time in my career I can think of where things were stagnant. But the pace of change, that being said, is quite a bit more than it was in the past. But regardless, that does not necessarily concern me. But what does concern me is the fact that when you know we want to build software, we want to build good software as a company. What the things that are changing because of AI outside the realm of what we do as a company or as a business is not something we don't we don't necessarily know all of those things, right? We're not privy to those things because that's not something that directly impacts us. At least that's what we believe. But those things that are outside our purview still make a difference to what we have to build now, because people are starting to consume products differently. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
download an app tomorrow, maybe you don't want to download an app, because I talked to a founder who said they do everything by email, so they don't have a web app or a mobile app as a client, for instance. But because of muscle memory, because of what we have focused on, we sometimes don't have the luxury as a small company to figure out what else is happening in the world out there that could have an impact on what we do, not immediately, not currently, but maybe 6 months, 12 months down the road. And with AI changing things at a dramatic pace, what does concern me, what gives me anxiety is that we don't exactly know everything that's changing in every industry, and things are changing ever so rapidly. So we don't want to be caught in the, hey, you know what, we thought that this was being done a certain way, but we don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a long answer, but there is a bit of a concern I have, because I know things are changing in law. I know things are changing in medicine. I know things are changing in manufacturing. You read about it here and there, but you don't exactly know. But you know things are out to change dramatically when it comes to robotics and whatnot. Earlier things were not changing that much, so you don't have to worry about it as much as a software company building
Mm-hmm.
software for those businesses. But now I have to help somebody, even from a managed services standpoint. I want to exactly know what they're doing, or why they're doing, or if they've caught up with everything else that I think I'm not caught up with, before I end up spending like a month working with them. Otherwise, we'll all end up building something that actually should not have been built because it was already there, or maybe Chat GPT was already doing it, that we spent time building something that's been there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Those are the unknowns, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns when it comes to other industries, and how AI is impacting those industries, and how that could indirectly impact us as a software company, is what concerns me. I don't know if it's a valid concern or not, but it certainly does concern me.
Yeah, I think that it's completely valid, right? And also being a small, nimble organization, I would say your superpower is being small and nimble, right?
Right.
Because you can react to the change quickly. I wonder what's going to happen to legacy organizations. They don't
Yeah.
move fast. What
I think I
they're going to
can.
miss out.
I think at some point you've got to drop the ball. Start something new. I think. I think you cannot keep adding, putting lipstick on a pig. There are companies that are bloated. I can think of Atlassian as one of those companies. I used to like Jira like 10 years ago, not for many many years now, but I know people who still love those products. And I saw, when I just kind of read up on what they've been doing recently, and I'm like, it's one of those companies that's been, I think, caught in time, which
Hmm.
is kind of sad because it is one of the nicer software companies. And the Wall Street's acknowledging that, right? They've dropped like 60 to 70%. I mean, they're not the only ones. A lot of the software SaaS companies have dropped, CRM and Workday, ServiceNow. But I can think of Atlassian as one of those companies that's got to say, you know what? Maybe people are not going to be using Jira or Confluence the way they've done it for the past 20 years. We've got to do something completely differently, right? And that's a moment of reckoning, because as a company that's
Hmm.
been your bread and butter, and you're not going to want to come to terms with that fact. But I think there will be a point where you're going to have to come to terms and maybe rebuild your user interface, and not have an interface that's 10 years old, 20 years old, just has some AI
Hmm.
integration, because it feels like I'm using the exact same product from like 2 decades ago, with just some extra support with the chat GPT like prompt interface, right? Which I think
Yeah.
is not gonna cut it, in my opinion. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm smiling and laughing right now because you mentioned Jira. And I always say Jira is the perfect reflection of the organization it's deployed in, right? The
Lovely.
more bottlenecks and bureaucracy an organization has, it is directly equivalent to as crazy as their Jira implementation.
You
So
have
it's
a
like that
story
was,
with like 15 different subtasks and assignees and updates and
yep.
comments. And I was talked to a founder, AJ, the other day. I asked him, one of our products is a project management platform, right? Snowball.com. So I asked him, hey, do you use any project management systems, or to manage your tasks? What do you do? He goes, no, Krish, I just go to ChatGPT and ask it what I should do next. I go do that thing, come back, and then ask what I should do after. They don't even track it anywhere. There is no ticketing system. Now, you could argue it's a smaller company, they could live without it. Yes, they can live without it. But Jira used to charge $10 for smaller companies. They're not even going to be able to make those $10 a month, because those
Hmm.
companies don't seem to apparently need that anymore, right? So I think that's at least my long-winded answer to your question. But any other questions you want to ask me?
I think we got a lot of this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I have one last question for you. If you
Yeah,
don't have anything to ask
absolutely.
me, one last question, and I'll let you have the closing comment as well.
Yeah.
Uh, you're going out to dinner. Today's Friday. Say you're going out to dinner. You live in DC. I love DC as a city. I live 20 miles west of there. What would be your order for appetizer, entree, and dessert? It doesn't have to be part of the same cuisine. You could pick one from three different cuisines. If you can just tell us what that order would actually look like.
You got me thinking about ramen right now because it's cold and rainy outside.
Okay,
So
that would be the entree, right?
that would be the entree, and I would probably pair that with what is it? Takoyaki? Is that the small octopus? Uh, I think it's called takoyaki.
Is it a Japanese thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Takoyaki. So takoyaki is a bowl-shaped snack of diced octopus and breading around it. It's almost like a tempura octopus and
Okay.
ramen. And then I'm a big fan of ice cream, but I probably wouldn't have that all in the same time because that's a lot of food.
No, okay. That
Yeah.
looks pretty rich and interesting. I'm vegetarian, but I'm trying to imagine some of these things will look pretty exotic. Um, Thank you so much, AJ. I really enjoyed this
Yeah.
conversation about vibe coding, about the challenges, AI tools, what people are currently using, what do you think they should be using, and a number of different items based on your experience from the past and what you're working on today as well. One more re-intro to AJ and let you have the closing comment. Folks, this is AJ Bubb, who's the AI strategist and founder at MXP Studio. I pulled up the website just at the top of this recording, and we'll include the link. So definitely, reach out to AJ. The website is facingdisruption.com. We'll include it on the podcast when we publish it as well. So AJ, thank you very much. I appreciate your thoughts. Your closing, just stay on the call for a minute or two after we are done. But your closing comment before we call it wraps?
Yeah. I think the biggest one is just keep being curious and dive deep and realize that we are all facing disruption, hence the name of my podcast. The only way we're going to get through it is by supporting each other. So if one thing that you took away from our conversation, Krish and I, uh, there is an upside and you just have to embrace it.
Thank you, AJ. Thanks, folks. Until next time.